What's up, everybody? Jason from Jason's Exotic Reptiles. Today I'm here with Dan Magano from Dan Magano Snakes. He breeds blood pythons and all kinds of cool stuff. He has a YouTube channel, Dan Magano Snakes. Today we're going to talk about some blood pythons. So Dan, welcome to Jason's Exotic Reptile channel. Thank you for coming out. You came from Connecticut, drove a couple hours to be here, and I really appreciate that. So today I want to talk a little bit about blood pythons, which I don't have on the channel at all, and I think that that's a kind of a cool addition. And if you guys are interested in blood pythons, make sure you check out his channel, again, Dan Magano Snakes, on YouTube. He's got some cool content, some real good tips, and I appreciate his channel because it's not really this kind of hyped up, cringy type of content. It's real stuff, giving you real tips, similar to what you're getting here. You like that?
Yeah.
He likes that. Similar to what you're going to get here. So I like that type of content. So Dan, with that said, what is your attraction to blood pythons? What is it about blood pythons that you really enjoy and makes you want to keep them and breed them?
Well, I looked at it from multiple levels. When I started out with snakes, African rock pythons are actually my favorite species. But it wasn't practical to have a large collection of those or to breed those because that's a snake that's really limited on your market for people. You know, I can't put that snake in anybody's hands and feel comfortable with it. Blood python, 99% of keepers that's something that they can keep. They have really cool personality. The size is good. Most cases, like a 4x2 cage is gonna be good for an adult. Sometimes you will get a blood that's larger and gonna need more space, but you're not ever looking at the same space you need for a retic or a berm or something like that, where it's much more of a commitment to how you house it. But yeah, the colors, the personalities, there's just a lot of things to really like. They handle well. You get a big snake feel,
Yeah.
but it's not something where you have to worry about it chasing you around the house, so that helps.
Yeah, and that's kind of, we were talking before this video went on, is I was, I used to breed blood pythons a long time ago, probably 10 years ago now, and I really enjoyed them, but I made this decision a while ago, am I going to do blood pythons or Burmese pythons? Because to me, blood pythons, they have a super cool head shape, and they're kind of like the smaller Burmese python, in my opinion. They get this nice heavy-bodied snake in this shorter package, so you don't need these larger enclosures. They're certainly heavy-bodied, but they're definitely lighter. They're smaller overall. And again, I made this decision to continue with Burmese pythons because I do boas, which I feel also fit that same kind of description in terms of general cage size and snake and colors and patterns. But I certainly appreciate the blood pythons. With that, I know blood pythons and short-tailed pythons get this bad reputation of being aggressive or defensive, and I've seen that myself, but from what I've seen when I breed the babies, at least the ones that I've managed and worked with, is they can be some really cool snakes. So would you also agree with that? I mean,
Yeah.
they have this reputation, and I think, at least I would say that they're probably like that, but would you agree with that in the sense that they can be calmed down and cool snakes?
It's one of those things, like a lot of things. The reputation is deserved in some aspect, but not in others. A lot of it was to do with wild-caught animals, like, same thing with retics and other species, where for a long time, they were coming in from the wild and they were different animals. And then also just us learning how to better manage them. Blood pythons and short-tails do not like extreme heat. It makes them very volatile. So if you're keeping other species and you're keeping your room at, say, 85 or something, you're going to have very defensive animals. They just don't like being that warm. It puts them in a bad mood to begin with and just, stresses them out, makes everything about it not fun for keeper or the kept. So if you keep them in the high 70s, low 80s, it's a much different animal. And it's weird because it's literally like a half a degree swing where you have a calm, cool animal and then it's just a psychopath. So you really have to manage it. And anytime somebody comes to me and says, hey, mine's being really defensive, it's the first thing I go over, because typically, probably 75% of the time, it's defensive because it's too warm. Everybody gets this thing where you take one species husbandry and just blanket it to everything.
Yep.
So everybody thinks, oh, you need this 90-degree hot spot, and that's the best way to make one want to kick your butt.
Okay.
Just put them in that.
And then with that as well, how about things like hot spots? Do you do ambient temperatures? Do you do hot spots? I know, like, a lot of people with pythons in general, they just do ambient.
Yeah.
I personally, with boas, my whole room is hot. We're hot. I'm sweating just sitting here, and it's humid, but I do provide them basking spots.
So I vary it. I found with babies, I like to have them have a hot spot So I have two different rooms that I use. One room I keep at about 80 to 82 degrees ambient. My other room, where I keep some of my Australian pythons as well, I keep cooler, and then I use more hot spots in there. So that room I might keep at about 70 degrees, unless I'm breeding the Australian stuff where you have to drop it cooler.
Yep.
But I'll keep it about 70 degrees, and then the bloods have a hot spot at about 84, 85. So that gives them an ambient range in like the mid to upper 70s, even up to 80, 81, and then they have that hot spot as well. But in my main snake room, it's pretty much strictly ambient. The babies I give back heat to, and then gravid females I also give a hot spot to, which I find about 75% of my gravid females will utilize it. Some don't at all, some do, on and off, and then some are just on it constantly. But I do like to offer that to them so they have that option.
Yeah, that's interesting because you mentioned back heat. And I personally don't use back heat. I think I've made some videos talking about it, but I know a lot of people that love it. And I've always wondered, what is the purpose of back heat over belly heat? And maybe it is kind of those species that are more susceptible to temperatures. They kind of get cranky, where you can provide them this kind of warmer back spot, but not necessarily an underbelly bottom heat. It's kind of more of this ambient gradient.
Yeah. The way I look at it is back heat I don't think is practical if your room is not heated ambient, because heat rises, it's never going to get the tub as hot. But from the standpoint of if you have a malfunction or something, back heat can be a little bit safer. So since I'm already heating the room and I'm just trying to get like maybe a half a degree to a 2 degree bump over what the room is, the back heat works well for that. But I always tell people, if your house is 60 or 70 degrees, you need belly, because it's just not gonna work with back heat.
I like that. Yeah, that makes sense. Then now, how about in terms of just breeding? When is your breeding season for these boas? Or with these boas, my breeding season's right now. Yeah. But when is your breeding season? I know you just made a video on some egg cutting. So I'm assuming it's a little earlier, right? Around
I mean, I have my first baby just for this season just pipped last night. But I really let the females kind of dictate. I don't do any cycling really. Bloods and shorttails seem to be a less is more kind of thing. Naturally, just living up here in New England, it gets colder in the wintertime, so they can feel that difference. Even though the room's heated ambient, they can feel the difference. They can feel the weather patterns, and weather patterns seem to trigger them more than anything. So when it starts raining heavy and snowing, that kind of gets them building and going. So I let them dictate. So anywhere from October to February, in that span is where I'll start pairing, and then I generally just look at how the pairing is going. If the male's still very interested, then I'll keep pairing up.
Yep.
And I'll put a male in. If he doesn't show interest within 2 days, I'll pull him out. If he does show interest, then I'll leave him in. Usually they'll go to opposite sides of the cage at some point, and that's when I'll pull him out, feed them, whatever. I keep feeding throughout breeding season with them. I do slow my females down a little bit, and the males as well. But until she ovulates, I'll keep offering food. And sometimes you miss an ovulation. I had a female eat like 5 days before she laid on me. I didn't even realize.
Yep.
I thought she ovulated when she was just getting ready to lay. I just missed it.
Yeah, it sounds very, very similar to Burmese pythons. And at least when I was breeding them, I treated them exactly the same. I was by no means doing a large collection. I just had a couple blood pythons and thought they were cool, so let me put them together and breed them in that sense. And thinking back, I don't even know if they were blood pythons or short-tailed pythons, which we were also talking about. If you could kind of sum up in a nutshell, what's the difference between a blood python and a short-tailed python? Because I see those terms commonly mixed. Yeah. Usually people will blanket everything as a blood python,
right?
And they will leave the short-tailed python separate, or they'll use the terms universally. Can they be used universally? Do they mean two separate things?
So yes and no. All bloods are short-tailed pythons, but not all short-tailed pythons are bloods.
Okay.
So you have this short-tail complex, which is 3 species that we have in the pet trade. There's a 4th species that's been identified from like 1 or 2 individuals, but it's not over here. It's not involved in anything that we do. And there's none in captivity that we're aware of. But you have the 3 species. So Python brongersmai is your blood pythons. Those are the ones that are typically red. They come from, Malaysia and parts of Sumatra. And the pet trade, you'll see a lot of people say Malaysian blood python.
Yep.
There's almost no Malaysian blood pythons in captivity in the United States. There's a few, but very few and far between pure ones. Places like Petco always sell theirs as Malaysians.
Okay.
But the ones that we get now are of Sumatran locality. just because Malaysia's been closed off for export for a long time,
Yep.
whereas Sumatra still does export. So most people's blood pythons are Sumatran blood pythons, which creates confusion with Sumatran shorttails. Their range does overlap a little bit, but they're kind of separated, northern and southern on the island.
Yep.
But the Sumatran shorttail python is Python curtis, and initially everything was listed under curtis. So they actually, when
Yes.
people say black blood and Borneo blood, it's really not an intelligent name because they were never blood pythons. They're still not blood pythons. That kind of started with the trade more. People were like, oh, this is a blood. But
Yes.
curtis was actually where everything was initially. So you had Python curtis brongersmai was your blood pythons considered a subspecies. That all changed in the early 2000s. And so as far as physical differences, the really true way to tell is scale count. And I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but bloods and shorttails have a different number of ventral scales. And they also have some different subocular scales.
And you have a video on that? Is that right?
I did a video on it. I don't remember what episode it was, probably like 19 off the top of my head or something like that. But it goes into the shorttails, the differences. We'll talk about those ventral scales. Now, most people are saying, well, how are you going to count ventral scales like that?
Yeah.
I find it easier if you have like a glass table, put them on there, take a picture from underneath, and then you can do that. Or
I like that.
take a picture and count the picture. Because if you're trying to count a snake and moving it in that way, it's not going to cooperate, and you're not going to count accurately because it's only a few scales that really make up the difference.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's...
It's not like it's 100 versus 60. It's like, high 60s versus 72 or something. It's very close.
Or you just buy from breeders like Dan who know
Yeah.
what they're talking about, and then you can just confirm that yes, this snake is what you think it is, or this snake is what you're being sold to. I know, we have a similar issue with boa constrictors right now in the boa industry, is that everything's labeled as a red-tailed boa, and there's a huge difference between the two, visual difference. Sometimes, and I'm sure there is with blood pythons and short-tail pythons as
Yeah.
well, but I think it gets to this point where you just have to have that recognition. A lot of people will ask me, well, can you make a video and show me the difference? And they still don't understand the difference.
Right.
And it just takes time. They want me to make a video of all the morphs, what's the difference between a sun-glow and albino, and there's ideal key traits that you're looking for, but there's also pieces that are not necessarily 100% indicators on every snake across the board.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it's very similar with the blood pythons and shorttails, and I personally think they're awesome snakes. I've considered for a while, do I want to get a couple of them just to play with, just to get back into. I think that they're really cool snakes, again, like the Burmese pythons, but a smaller package, and the temperaments are, in my experience, really cool.
Yeah.
I remember when I was, 16 years old, I had these two giant blood pythons. I don't know if they were shorttails. They were like these bright red color.
Probably bloods.
Probably bloods, okay.
Shorttails don't really get red.
So Python curtis would be the species or so?
Brongersmai would be the bloods. Curtis and Breitensteini are the two shorttail species. Breitensteinis
Okay.
being Borneo shorttails.
I also had black ones. What were those?
Those are the Sumatran shorttails.
Okay, so
that's my favorite of the three species. If you want to talk about a snake that just has a cool temperament, they're
Yep.
they don't care about anything. The only thing about them to note is they have an extremely strong food response. So once they know it's time to eat, don't try to handle them because they just
Yep.
swing at anything. And it's not that they're aggressive or defensive or anything. It's just they get one-track minded. Berms can be the same way. When berms know they're going to be fed,
Yes.
there's no telling them you're not feeding them right now. They're there,
That's kind of interesting. That was one thing I noticed when I had my babies, is they were like crazy little things. When they bit, they didn't bite straight. I'd hold them and they'd go like side to side.
Thrash, yeah.
Which was fine. Like it was cool. They were like these just really cool little snakes that were, like in my opinion, a step up from a ball python, a step down from a blood python in terms of size. Really smart snakes and just
They're very smart.
interesting overall. Not super active, which allows you to keep them in a reasonably sized enclosure. And that's kind of what I push for the Burmese pythons as well, is that they're large snakes, but when you compare them to something like a retic is a large snake that is an active snake.
Yeah.
And same thing with monitors. You have an Argus monitor or a water monitor. Water monitor is a larger monitor, but the Argus is an active little agile monitor that needs a lot of room for that reason.
Yeah, water monitors move when they have to, basically, and
Yeah.
occasionally when they want to check things out. But
So you can, you almost need the same size cage for an adult water monitor as you would for an adult Argus, even though they're half the size.
Yeah.
So I think that aspect of bloods are really cool, and I may get back into them. I'm focusing on what I'm doing here. with the boas, but I think they're awesome snakes. So if you guys are looking for something that's a little bit unique, that is certainly out there in the pet trade, look up guys like Dan. He's got some cool stuff, and he knows what he's talking about. He's a good dude. He's not gonna do you wrong. So definitely check out his channel. You want to say anything else about Bloods and Short Tails before we cut it
One
here?
of my favorite features about them that's different than a lot of other snakes is with a lot of other snakes, with your boas, with your berms and stuff, when you come in to the room, if they want to look at you, they'll move their head and they'll follow you around the room. Bloods don't move their head, they'll move their eyes. So there's the epitome of an ambush predator, so they don't want to give up their location. So it's kind of creepy when you're not used to it, to watch the way their eyes will just follow everything you do. And they also, something to keep in mind, a lot of snakes will go and grab them from behind when we're not sure how they're going to be. Bloods can get you in any direction if they decide to.
Fun.
They're very athletic. They look fat and slow, but they're huge springs. So you always want to keep that in mind. They can strike at you from behind very accurately. A lot like a gaboon viper, similar thing where they look heavy and slow, but those snakes, I think, fastest venomous strike. And Bloods and Short Tails strike very fast. So you do want to learn your body language, because they'll tell you in advance when they're upset. And you're talking about the thrashing. That's something that they do when they're nervous, especially when people handle. They're so terrestrial, so handling them is very unnatural. So if they don't have trust in the keeper, then they'll often thrash because they just want to get back to the ground in any way that they can, and they have no regard for their safety. So you want to keep that in mind too. If you're handling and you're unsure, do it over carpeting if you can, or a soft surface, because they will just throw themselves at the mercy of whatever they hit.
That's awesome. Well, with that said, I may have to buy some Bloods or Short Tails, one of them. I'm going to have to check out what Dan has available, because I think he's going to be my go-to for this stuff.
Got some stuff hatching right now.
Yeah, so actually, and before we end this, what is the one thing that you're working on? I guess your most anticipated piece, or what's your most exciting project that you're looking forward to, either this year or in the future to come?
I was going to say, this year I kind of took a quiet year. I didn't pair up a lot of stuff. I just needed kind of a mental break for myself. I've just been going so hard. I was like, you know what, I want an easy season. Plus, I'm a quality over quantity person, so I want to line up some projects. I don't want to just breed the same females every year. I like to rotate stuff out, give them some time off. So I think right now, this clutch that's hatching, I'm actually really excited about. This is a holdback male that I produced back in 2016. This is his first clutch. His father threw amazing stuff. His mother throws amazing stuff. So I'm hoping that'll work through him and see. These are Borneo Short Tails. Probably my favorite to breed are Borneos. Curtis is my favorite species, but the Borneos are super polygenic, so every clutch is varied. You can repeat the same pairing 3 years in a row and get 3 different results.
That's awesome.
So it's frustrating at times when you're shooting for something and you miss it, but it's really cool, the anticipation that every time you check that incubator and something's pipping, you don't know what's coming. You know, with a lot of stuff, you know, like as much as I like breeding like quality reds, you know, you pair 2 quality reds together, you're going to get quality reds, like you know what's coming. With Borneos, it can be a crazy genetic stripe that throws out, this crazy gene comes out here, stuff works together that you didn't even know was there and just comes to the surface through, you know, line breeding a certain trait. So definitely excited about that. For the Curtis, I work with chrome heads and super dark. I love the super dark stuff.
Okay.
And I have some holdbacks that are coming of age this season and next that I'm really, really excited to get into the rotation and see what they can do.
Yeah, man, that sounds awesome.
That's what I'm looking forward to most.
So you got a couple, you know, some this year, but some cool years to come, and that's
and that's what
great.
You should build for, right? Every year you're trying to kick last year's ass, so that's the goal.
I can't wait for next year. So I'm 100% with you. So with that said, guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please remember to like, subscribe, share if you find it worthy. Check out Dan's channel. I'll put a link in the description above, and I appreciate it. Until next week, thanks, guys.
See you guys.